My name's Lynn Peters. I'm the co-executive director at Harbor Cove.
What has this experience been like for you, and how has it been helpful?
Well, I think the exciting piece about being at the conference is there's so many people that you can have conversations with, and conversations are so important in terms of just all the people that you have sort of like right there, right now, that are willing to talk about things and to talk very deeply about things, and everyone has a different lens. Can be really overwhelming and intense, but also really stimulating and exciting at the same time, and things that you puzzle over. You have things to think about when you go home, and opportunities to make some adjustments and make some changes.
So why is this conversation important for our movement?
At the crux of it is how we're actually, and I hate to use the terminology around providing services because, but that's sort of the shorthand. So it's really the folks that are kind of coming through and looking for support, and particularly the folks that are not coming through and looking for support. The communities within our communities that we're not reaching for a variety of reasons. And again, I'm speaking from the perspective of a white woman in a position of leadership at a community organization.
Right. So you're really talking about it from doing it as an ally.
As an aspiring ally.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about the workshop that you and Karu presented yesterday, and about, I know that we learned a little bit about how there's the shared power structure. Mm-hmm. How has that worked for you, or what do you feel has been the benefit for you as an aspiring ally?
The piece that really gets at it for me is the intentionality. It's the going in with awareness, and that awareness grows and changes on an everyday basis, because as a white woman doing this work, just when you think you figured something out, you walk into another, and I say wall, but I don't necessarily mean it as an obstruction or a barrier, but it's another sense of surprise, another sense of awareness. And the intentionality piece is, this isn't just two women working together. It's that, and it's not just a woman of color and a white woman working together to try to do work with survivors and communities to change the way that things happen. And it's also on and on. But I think the beauty of our work together is the intentionality piece. We're talking about sharing power. We're not just talking about sharing a job. So the knowing going in that everything that we do, everything that we don't do, has an impact within the organization, with the folks that are working with us as co-workers, in the community with the survivors who are coming through the doors, and who we're going outside of the doors to, working with our board to affect change on a broader scale. Mm-hmm. This is both of us knowing everything about what's going on. It's not siloing the work, so that I think particularly for my partner in this work, that it's really important that she be seen as an expert in not only the direct service work, but in the critical thinking in the work, in the finances within the work, in the administration of the work, all of those microaggressions that we trip over every day, that we have some assumptions that we're making about leadership, and so that's really where the rubber hits the road for me in this work. Mm-hmm. And how that feels for me as a woman to recognize that I have a different level of power and privilege, and how I'm gonna strategically share that, how I'm gonna give that away, how I'm gonna stand back when it's time to stand back, how I'm gonna stand in front of my partner when it's necessary and strategic and important that I stand in front, and always be seen as standing beside, being directed through this work, not leading the work.
How has that impacted like your staff and your board? And ultimately, how has that benefited your services in being more inclusive in reaching the communities?
Start with the services piece. I mean, I can't help but think that the access has been transformed, and I want to say that we learn every day, that we learn oops every day. We learn why didn't we think of that every day? So we're by no means experts. It's really in the model of the approach. So if someone comes through and they speak a language that we don't speak on staff, that's not a barrier to working with us. And that runs the spectrum of identifying a community partner that can help us with that, identifying a safe person within the community that can help us communicate. The whole point is to stay safe. And it's also run the whole spectrum when there's no one to speak the language, where people are working together and you can always understand what's going on and how to keep someone safe in that moment. Listening to what's important in different communities and how they want to be supported, what kind of broader change, maybe how we can partner with different communities within the community. For the staff, we have nearly 30 full and part-time staff, split right around down the middle. And of we're predominantly people of color within the organization. We have men of color, white men, white women, and we're predominantly women of color make up our staff. And I would like to think that this model serves as a model for leadership, as some hope that there's access to attain different levels of leadership and influence. Not everybody wants to take quote-unquote leadership, but to actually have influence and impact on the way decisions are made, on how we do the work together, what's important in your own life, what you bring into the work, all of those decisions. The organization tries not to make those organizations for the people that we work with as a team, as co-workers.
If you could provide like one or two tips for an organization that wants to kind of look at this kind of structure, what would you suggest?
I would encourage people to start at the point where you're thinking about the relationships that coming from a staff perspective, from who's actually doing the work as a team, the relationships and how those relationships can be built and nurtured and supported before you even start to have conversations. To not make the assumption that you're going to walk into a room and say, okay, let's change things so that it's better. There's some process that needs to start before then. People actually need to be engaged and talking with each other in a way that's genuine and real. And then in terms of looking at how the organization is structured, I mean, there's organizations reflect, for the most part, mainstream, and even some organizations that don't necessarily think that they're mainstream. There's some real institutionalized practices. Something that comes to mind really simply is holidays. Does the organization dictate which holidays that the center is closed? Does it how does that work? do people actually get to choose holidays? That's something so simple that puts decisions in the hands of the team and can begin different conversations. That's a really simple way to start, and something that just speaks volumes for an approach.
So by having this happen on a management level, in terms of taking this type of inclusive approach with management and having that with your staff, ultimately, how does that help us in terms of preventing violence against women?
Well, it changes the way we relate to each other.
Well, I think one of the things I would suggest is that it helps to model.
I think we're so used to having things happen at us, and particularly if we're women, and then you keep layering it. And if you can do anything that flips that model, it begins to change that dynamic of power and control. I think my co-director said, racism is about power and control, and that's exactly what domestic violence, sexual assault, that's what it's all about. So if you can begin to flip that and start having models of different ways to do business, that's the beginning.
I know that I heard from one prevention staff person in a few months ago tell me that, when we talk about empowerment and we talk about liberation, like collective empowerment and collective liberation, we can't really demonstrate that in our services and that collective liberation unless we practice that ourselves.
I mean, when you look at policies and approaches to how you do the work, you got to walk the walk. You really got to walk the walk, and that's deep. And even when you think you get it, you really got it. You have to always be checking yourself to see if you're really walking the walk. Who's in the room? What's the conversation about? Who's leading the conversation? What are the question? What are even the questions in the room? How are you even approaching it?
So if you were to give another, one tip that you could give to an aspiring ally, like a colleague of yours in the field, like another executive director or such, or even another person in the community or in this movement, what would you suggest to them?
I think for me, learning to listen differently is the most challenging, and also the magic. When you start to listen differently, and you learn how to listen differently, and you're filtering it differently, that's when the magic happens. So just to listen. Just try to listen without saying anything. Try to ask for clarification when you're listening, and then things will begin to move.